In today's video, I'm sharing 20 spring Dollar Tree DIYs. These are some of my favorites, and I hope they bring you some fun spring inspiration. For the first DIY, I'm going to make a beautiful wooden round planter basket. So I'll be using this wood round from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut it right in half. So I mark the center, and with a ruler as my guide, which I tape down so it won't move, I score the wood several times with a utility knife until it cuts right through. So now I have two halves, which will make the sides of our project. I'm going to stain one side of the halves. I'm using a water-based stain in the shade Special Walnut. Now this is going to be inside, but I still wanted to add a little color to it, although you can leave it as is or paint it another color. So I apply the stain and then I wipe out the excess. On the other side, I'll be using this gorgeous wallpaper with a sticky bottom from Dollar Tree. It has these lovely greenery stems with muted shades of green. So what I'll do next is cut the wallpaper to fit the two halves of the wood. I simply trace the shape onto the wallpaper. Now you will need two pieces to completely cover the wood, but while they almost fit perfectly, they're just a tad bit too long. So before I place the wood on top, I do peel that little strip on the back side to expose the sticky bottom, and then I place the wood down on a corner, and that just keeps it from moving around while I trim the wallpaper down. I do the same thing with the other half, removing that little strip and then placing the wood on top and trimming it down to size. And then I just pull out the backing paper and smooth out the wallpaper. To frame the basket, I'll be using a couple of these wooden wreath base from Dollar Tree. Instead of wood, it has that cardboard craft paper texture, so I'm going to paint over that with a similar shade. And I'm just mixing apple barrels, territorial beige, and khaki. So I brush that on all over the rings, the front, the back, and the sides. Now since I will be gluing the wood on each of them, I do try to make sure to not apply any paint on half of one side. Next, I'll be using some white string from Dollar Tree, about 5 feet in length, as well as a handful of popsicle sticks, about 15 or so, although I do end up using more. And I dry brush some white chalk paint over them. I do want it to look kind of weathered, so I just lightly go over them a couple of times, making sure there isn't too much paint on the brush. Next, I place the rings together, and I'm going to wrap the string a couple times around to hold them in place. I'm not going to use the whole string just yet. I just want it to hold the rings together at the top so that I can figure out the width of the base. This will also help me determine how short to trim the popsicle sticks. But if you prefer a wider base, you can also use longer sticks. And once I determine that, I trim a stick to fit. And I just apply some hot glue on the ends and place it on the bottom of the circle. And then I continue to mark and trim a couple more of the sticks, and I glue them in place, spacing them out a bit. I glue down about 4 sticks. And now that the rings are positioned correctly, I go back and finish wrapping the string on top. This is going to serve as the handle, so it needs to be placed at the center top, and I just keep that in mind and use it as a guide as I'm placing down the base. So I just continue gluing down the base, measuring them and trimming them down. Also, the higher up you go, the sticks will need to be cut at an angle, so I just mark that and I trim the sticks to match as much as possible. But really no big deal if it doesn't. This is going to be covered by the sides, so unless you're looking for it, you won't notice it too much. How far up you want the sticks to go is really up to you. You can have it go as high up as you want, or up until it reaches the top of the wood. I decided to have it go just a bit under the top of the half wood. Now, unless you'll be hanging this, you'll want to place a couple of dowels or blocks underneath to keep it from rocking. But first, I'm going to glue the wood to the sides. You can use wood glue or hot glue or a combo of both. So I just apply the glue along the bottom curve, and then I attach that on one side of the ring, making sure to push it down so that it's flush on the bottom. I place some clamps around to make sure it bonds tightly together, and I give it a little bit of time to bond, and then I apply glue on the other half, and then I glue that in place on the other side. Once that's dried, I glue a couple dowels on the bottom to keep it from rocking, and this DIY is done. I always love making little wooden trays or crates, so for the spring theme DIY, I grabbed a couple of these little wooden bunnies from Dollar Tree. This plank, which I trimmed down to about 9 inches, and 6 bamboo sticks, which I got on Amazon. I add some glue to the ends of the plank, and then I stick the wooden bunnies on each end. For extra support and strength, I glue a tumbling block on each corner. I'm going to glue 3 bamboo sticks on each side, going along with the curve of the bunny. So I measure and mark them, and then I trim them with my miter shears. And then I just glue them on the sides, spacing them out evenly to make sure there's enough space to place some candles or little pots or vases. I'm also making sure not to glue the bamboo sticks too close to the bottom or the top, or else it'll just make it too narrow to put anything in. I glue them on both sides, and look how adorable this looks. And you know, this actually looks really beautiful with just the raw bare wood. You can just seal it with some protective finish and you're all done, but I wanted to add some stain to it to give it a rustic finish. I'm using Early American by Varathane, but if you're going to be staining, just make sure to give it a little sanding, especially around the sides, because that area is a little rough and it's going to soak up a lot of stain, which it did for me. You can also paint the bamboo a different color or add some stenciling on the bunny, or even Mod Podge some beautiful spring napkins onto them. But in the end, I really love how this turned out. For this project, I'll be using this 14-inch grapevine wreath. I get these at Michael's and they're quite inexpensive. I think this was just under $5. I'm going to fill it with some Dollar Tree flowers, keeping it pretty simple. I'm going with these white and purple shades, along with a few dainty flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet. And I'm just going with these smaller ones to keep it light, natural, and airy. I love how delicate these flowers look. I want this bunch here to look more full, and I'll be using 4 of these on the wreath. I love the tiny white flowers, and I'm going to be attaching some colorful ones to the bunch. So to do that, I'm just pulling out some of the white flowers on top, and they just pop right out. And then I'm sliding in some of the colorful ones, like these pretty yellows and pinks, and I'm just pushing that down, and then I just place that white one back on top. I'm adding these gorgeous lavender stems from Dollar Tree and attaching them to the bunch. I do use quite a bit of these on each stem. Sometimes I'll even add 3 on a single stem. Now you can keep it as full or simple as you like, but either way, it gives off that natural wildflower vibe. You can even just pop them in a vase or in a white ceramic pitcher for a simple, beautiful arrangement. It's so pretty. Dollar Tree also has these beautiful rustic looking white leaf trays that I got recently, and it would also look so pretty placed on top with some candles. Okay, so back to the wreath. To attach, I'm first bending the bottom stem to match the natural curve of the wreath. And then I'm just tucking the flowers inside the grapevine, gently working them into place. Now you can always add extra reinforcements like hot glue or floral wire to make sure everything stays secure. But I'm just mostly letting the flowers naturally tuck into the wreath and just securing a few areas here and there. I only made 4 bunches for this wreath, so I spread them out as best as I could, but you can definitely add a few more for a fuller look. Now I'll be filling in any gaps and empty spaces to balance everything out. I'll also be adding a wooden sign right across, so I did make space for that. So 4 bunches was just enough for this one. For the wooden sign, I'll be using this wood plank from Dollar Tree. This one's 18 inches and I'll be trimming it to about 14 inches or so. For the wording, I have a couple options, both from Dollar Tree. There's this wooden home sign, and I love these. They come in a 2-pack. They're quite thick, and I do use them a lot. The other option was this welcome metal sign. I like the font and the length, so I decided to go with that one. I'll be painting the word white and staining the wood with antique wax. So I'm applying the antique wax with a damp cloth to keep it from going on too thick or too dark. Since the wreath is already a deep color, I want the wood to be a few shades lighter to create some contrast while adding some warmth. Before I paint the metal, I noticed that there were a couple of holes that I wanted to cover up, so I decided to just glue a couple of these metal thumbtacks, and these are also from Dollar Tree. Now I decided to snip off that nail part, but you know, you don't have to. You can also just hammer that straight onto the wood as well. So I just glue them right over the holes and they blend in really nicely. You can leave it like this, but I'm going to paint this white. Now I was going to use acrylic paint, but I changed my mind and decided to take it outside and spray paint it instead. I thought I was completely out of the white spray paint, but thank goodness there was still a little left in the can. Next, I'm gluing it onto the wood, and I'm using Titebond multi-surface glue for a stronghold, along with a few dabs of hot glue to keep it all in place while it sets. And the final step is to attach everything in place. Once that's done, I go in and fill in any gaps or empty spaces that needs a little more fullness. I'm adding these purple flowers from Dollar Tree, along with some leftover lavender to bring in more of that soft wildflower look. I love how this turned out. It has such a rustic, organic look, almost like it was gathered straight from a garden. And with that, this DIY is all finished. I will be using this really cool wooden letterboard from Dollar Tree. It's got a handy little rope on top for hanging, which I will be removing. And the best part, it comes with a whopping 124 letters, so you can create whatever seasonal phrase you want. I'll also be using this 5-gallon paint stir stick. So first, I measure the length of the board, and I add ½ an inch more to it. With a miter box and saw, I'll be cutting 2 to that size. I'm going to be gluing these to the top and bottom of the board. I turn the board over and remove the rope that's stapled on the back. I'm going to run some glue along the top of the board. After that, I'll turn the board over and glue it right in the center of a paint stick. You can also add a little bit of hot glue to help hold it in place. Once that's done, I'll repeat the same process on the other end, applying glue on the edge and adhering it to the trimmed paint stick. If you want to add more support, you can glue a tumbling tower block on the bottom back as well. I clean up any glue that has seeped out before it dries. I've already sanded and lightened the ruler marks on the top, but I want to make sure they won't show through, so I'm going to sand it down even more. I'm going to be painting some areas of the board with this beautiful antique gold from Faux. With a small brush, I paint the inner borders. You can also use pastel colors to really make the board pop. I think that would look really nice as well. Then I paint the top and bottom paint sticks that I glued earlier. And this will give the board a more polished look. I also paint the edges of the borders where the letter tiles go in. And to avoid getting any paint on the board, I place a strip of cardstock in the slots. I'm loving how it's looking so far, but as I look at it from the side, it's looking a little too thin for my liking. So to fix that, I'm going to grab a bamboo stick and measure the height between the 2 paint sticks. And I trim it down with my miter shears, and I'll make 2 of these. I paint them gold to match, front and back, and I make sure to keep one side edge unpainted, which I'll be applying glue on. I turn the board on its back and apply a little bit of glue on that bamboo stick edge that was left unpainted, and I place it down on the edge of the board like so. And look at that, what a difference that strip of wood made. I'm going to add some embellishments on the board. I'm going to be using a couple of these beautiful lavender from this bundle I purchased at Target. I'm also going to add some of these cute wooden roses. I got these at Dollar Tree. They are so adorable, and I'm going to use 3 of them. I arrange the roses in a triangle with the flowers facing out, and then I glue them in place. Next, I pick out a couple lavenders and I pull out the branch, and I just tuck them inside the flowers, securing them with a little hot glue. I add a couple more to make it look more full, but before I add even more, I want to make sure I have enough space for the letters. So I rip out the letters that I need. Because it's spring, I'm going to spell out every bunny welcome, which thankfully should fit perfectly on the board. And then I just add a few more lavender and I am done. This letterboard turned out so adorable. I love that you can stand it up, and you can keep it up all year round. For this project, I'm going to be using a couple of these blank white egg-shaped signs with a wood grain texture on top from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using these spring napkins, and these are from Dollar Tree as well. I love the pastel floral pattern. I'm going to be making a thick 2-sided wooden egg decor piece with one side showing the wood grain and the other side this floral pattern. I'm not going to be using these holes on top, so I just add a little spackle to cover that up. The white has a bit of a light gray tone to it, so to not let that white spackle stick out, I'm just going to lightly brush the whole egg with some paint that matches. With the other one, I'm going to paint the back side with that paint. Once the paint has dried on the wood shape that has been painted on the back, I'm going to place a napkin on top, and then I'm just seeing which part of the napkin I want, and then I cut it out. The napkin has 2 layers, so I remove the bottom layer. Then I apply a layer of Mod Podge on top of the wood egg, making sure to cover the whole surface. I carefully place the napkin on top, smoothing out any lumps. While that's drying, I want to distress the other one. So I start with a sanding block, sanding around the edge, then I switch to a coarse grit sandpaper. I really like the scratch marks it made. I'm going to place one of the wood in front of the other with blocks in between to give some depth. I'm going to deepen the color a bit with some Waverly Antique Wax, and I apply that with a damp cloth. Once it's dried, I'm going to glue the 4 blocks together side by side, and this is going to make the base. I turn the egg over so that the back is facing up, and I apply glue on the ends of the glue blocks. You want to make sure it's flush with the bottom of the egg when it's standing up. Then I just take a block at a time and I glue it along the edge of the shape. I space them apart about a little less than a width of a tumbling block. You can definitely glue them closer together or farther apart. I wanted this to be double-sided with both sides showing that white wood grain, but since the egg wasn't symmetrical, which I later found out, I couldn't glue them back to back. But I didn't want that back to go unused, which is why I decided to Mod Podge the floral napkin so that no space is put to waste. Once I glue down the last piece, I put it aside for a bit. I use a sanding sponge to remove any excess napkins still sticking out, and I just sand downwards along the edge, and that comes off really easily, leaving a nice clean smooth edge. Alright, so to put this together, I start by putting some glue on the ends of each block. Honestly, I couldn't imagine trying to do this part with hot glue. I don't think I'd be fast enough, so I use wood glue, which will hold this whole thing together even better. I place the other half on top like so, and I just make sure it's placed evenly and it actually fit together nicely. I really like the way it looks already, but I wanted to add some words to it. I had this hello word from a prior project, so I wanted to do something just like that with the spring word. These wooden letters are from Michaels. To match, I paint them white, and then I get a popsicle stick and trim it to fit spring. And then I apply some Waverly Antique Wax with a damp cloth. I wanted to add a border behind the popsicle sticks, and so I trimmed down some Dollar Tree wood planks, just slightly bigger than the popsicle sticks. I paint them with this beautiful lavender color from Hobby Lobby, and so I apply a couple coats, and once that's dry, I glue the popsicle sticks on top. Now at this point, I really wasn't sure if I liked it with or without the word. Either way, it looks really nice. But in the end, I decided to just put the word spring on top. And this DIY is done. Dollar Tree sells these really nice wooden slices in different sizes and shapes, and for this project, I'll be using a couple of their rectangular one. Now I did make sure that they were similar in size because we'll be making a cute little planter box with them. I'll also be using a couple of these square mini wooden pallets, also from Dollar Tree. First, I need to remove the jute hanger and the staples. The staples are pretty secure, so I'm using my pliers to pull out the string and a staple remover to pull the staples out. It's really attached in there, so if you don't want to deal with it, you can always just leave the staples in place. I'm going to apply some antique wax over the wooden slices to give them a nice warm look. I'm using a damp cloth to apply the wax. I want the wax to go on very lightly, so using a damp cloth helps to spread it out without making it too dark or overpowering. Now you can leave it as is for a natural rustic finish, or if you prefer, you can also paint it for a completely different look. Now for the mini wooden square palettes, I'm going to use this beautiful celery green chalk paint from Waverly. It's a soft, fresh color that adds a pop of brightness without being too overpowering. I love how chalk paint gives a smooth, matte finish, and it looks really pretty on these little wooden pieces. Now there are some hard to reach areas inside the palettes, and so I had to use a smaller brush to really get into those spots. Once everything is dried, I'm going to glue them together. So I'm just applying some wood glue on the sides of the palettes, and I'm applying it on both of them. And then I stand up one of the slices and attach the pallets on the edges. And then I attach the remaining wooden slice to form a rectangle. To make the base, I'll be using a couple small square dowels and 3 giant craft sticks. So to match, I'm applying some of that antique wax on the craft sticks. And then I'm painting the square dowels with that same celery chalk paint. Okay, once that's dry, I'm applying some wood glue on the inside bottom of the square pallets, and then I'm just attaching the dowel to that, and I'm making sure that the bottom is flush. Then I just do the same thing on the opposite side, applying glue on the pallet where the dowel is going to be attached. So these dowels are what's going to hold up the craft stick base. After that, I just apply some glue on the dowels or the ends of the craft sticks, and I place that down to create the base. And I'm using 3 craft sticks, spreading them out equally. Now I was going to end here, it's so perfect just like that, but then I thought it would look really beautiful with some decorative stenciling, at least on one side. It was such a nice blank canvas. And so I got this stencil 3-pack from Walmart. This was just under $3. The stencils are beautiful and the birds on the branches are so charming. I wanted to add one of those designs. I'll be using black chalk paint, but you can also add some different colors there. Maybe black and white for the feathers on the bird, a dark brown on the branches, and some green on the leaves. So that's another option. So I'm applying the black chalk paint over the stencil, making sure to dab out as much excess paint as I can. I'm gently tapping it over the stencil, working it in light layers to get a smooth, even coverage. This way I avoid any smudging and keep the design edges nice and crisp. Once I'm done with that, I carefully remove the stencil before it dries completely, and this one is all done. It's such a simple yet beautiful project, and I love how it turned out. You can add some flowers, succulents, or candles, or even use it as a little organizer for your favorite things. For this project, I'm going to be using a couple of frames from Dollar Tree, as well as this beautiful floral fabric also from Dollar Tree. I'm going to start with a larger frame, so I just turn that over and I remove the backing board and the little cardboard inside. I'm going to cut the fabric to fit inside the frame, and so I just use that cardboard as a template. So I cut out the fabric, but unfortunately I didn't pay attention to the direction of the pattern and I didn't position it correctly. I wanted the frame to stand vertically and not horizontally, so I just had to recut it. There's a white foam around the frame which I removed, and I also won't be using the glass. Now that backing board is quite flimsy, so I glue that additional cardboard to strengthen it up. You can also replace that with a more sturdy foam board as well. And then I hot glue the fabric onto the board, making sure it's lying completely flat. I turn it over and then I just trim out the excess fabric. I pop the fabric in the frame and close it up. Because I'm not putting the glass back in, there's going to be a little extra room in the back, so you can leave it, which I did. Or you can fill it up with another layer of cardboard or secure it with a little bit of hot glue. But wow, look at that! I really love the fabric against the gold. For the smaller white frame, I'm going to be using this home sign left over from a previous video, this Dollar Tree plank which I'd cut in half from a prior project, and some scrap burlap. I placed the backing board on top of the burlap and then I cut that amount out. And I'm going to glue the burlap on the board. There's some black metal popping out of it, so I just paint over that with some matching acrylic paint to cover it up. I place the burlap on top and hot glue it in place. To get the home sign to fit on the plank, I cut it in half and then I just touch up the areas needed with some black acrylic paint. I paint the plank with some leftover sample paint that I have. This is Sea Frost from Glidden and it's just a beautiful light tone gray. I trim out the excess burlap and then I place that back in the frame and I secure the tabs. I glue the home sign in place, placing the letters vertically with the HO on top and the ME on the bottom. I add some hot glue to the back of the plank and place that right in the center of the burlap. Alright, that is it for this one, and I'm really happy with how the frames turned out. They look so beautiful together and they really complement each other well. For the next DIY, I'm going to be using this black metal wheel wreath ring from Dollar Tree. This measures about 14 inches in diameter. I picked out some florals and stems for this wreath. These I got at Michael's and the flowers are from Target. I'll also be using the strip of wood that's long enough to go across the wheel. You can also use a 5-gallon paint stir stick. I'll also be using some jute twine. This one's from Dollar Tree and some floral wire. I'm going to tie the wood on the wheel and I make sure it goes horizontally across. I take some jute and wrap it around the wood and the wheel like so. I turn the wheel over and tie a couple knots to secure it in place. For extra support, you can also apply some hot glue on the wood and wheel. This next part is really easy. I take the flowers and position them opposite one another. I also bend the stems to match the curve of the wheel. I'm going to glue the flowers onto the wood, so I just add a little hot glue on the stems of the flowers and glue that in place. I'm leaving a little space in the center where I'm going to place a bow later. So next I take the greenery stems and attach that on the ends. This helps to create a fuller look and really makes the flowers stand out. To make sure they stay in place, I add a little bit of hot glue and then I use some floral wire to secure everything together. I add a pop of color with some lavender stems and I stick them into the greenery to give it a nice contrast. To make sure they don't fall out, I secure them in place with a little bit of hot glue. Then I add a little more greenery where I think it's needed, and this helps to create an even fuller and more lush look that really brings everything together. I'm going to make a bow using this wired burlap ribbon that I picked up from Walmart. First, I'm going to pull out about 5 to 6 inches of ribbon and gather it at the top, which will become the center of the bow. The bottom part of the ribbon will be the tail. Next, I form a loop by bringing the ribbon towards the back center and then pinching it all together. This will be the right side of the bow. I move the tail to the side. Then I form another loop on the opposite side, gathering it towards the center and twisting the ribbon. I repeat this process to form another loop on the opposite side and continue until I have the desired number of loops. I then form a small central loop and then I just adjust the loops to make sure everything looks even. To secure the bow, you can use a twist tie or pipe cleaner or a zip tie, and I just run that through the small loop and secure it in the back. And that's it. Your bow is now complete and ready to use. Next, I'm going to be using this Dollar Tree wood plank, which comes in a pack of 6. First, I'm going to paint the plank white with some apple barrel acrylic paint. I brush that on all over, and then I sand it a bit with a coarse grit sandpaper. And I'm going to be using the stencil from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to be using the part that says "It's good to be home," and I center that on the plank. I tape the sides with some painter's tape so that it won't move around, and I'm going to be using this dark brown chalk paint from Hello Hobby. It's called Cafe Noir, and I'm going to apply it with a small round foam brush. I load the brush with some paint and I make sure to dab out any excess paint, and then I apply it lightly, pouncing it on the cutout as well as in circular strokes. I carefully remove the tape and stencil and I let that dry a bit. Then for some dimension, I dab the edge of the plank, especially the corners, with the dark paint. I just want to add a hint of dark on the corners, so I'm going very light-handed with this. Then I glue the plank towards the right side of the wood strip. I add some burlap ribbon on top to hang, and the spring wreath is done. I love how it turned out. Using this photo frame from Dollar Tree. I want this frame to be able to display some flowers or stems. So for this project, I will be using 1 giant popsicle stick, about 7 square dowels, and 4 tumbling tower blocks. The popsicle stick is going to be part of the base, so I stand the frame up and I place a popsicle right in front of it. And then I place a tumbling block on top, one on each side of the frame. Then I mark the distance the block extends out to, as well as the width of the frame, and I trim the popsicle stick accordingly. I also measure, mark, and trim the square dowels. These are from Amazon, they're balsa wood, and these are best trimmed or sliced with a craft knife. In place of that, you can also use round dowels as well as skewers. Once everything has been trimmed, I'm going to brush over with some white acrylic paint. Now I don't want this to be too opaque. I do want the wood underneath to be seen just to match the frame, so I just brush over it lightly. I paint the rest of the wood, the popsicle stick, and the tumbling blocks, and I make sure to leave one side of the blocks unpainted. Once everything is dried, I'm going to go ahead and glue the blocks on top of the popsicle sticks first, before gluing it onto the frame. So I'm using some wood glue, and I glue 2 blocks on each end. And it's going to look like a U. Now I'm not sure what happened to my footage, but to attach the pieces together I used a combination of hot glue and E6000. I can tell that the frame material may not hold well with hot glue and could possibly even come loose over time. Next I glue the dowels down. I place the first one towards the bottom, and then I glue the top, and then the middle. I'm just trying to space them out evenly. Now you can glue down more or less dowels, either way I'm sure it will look nice. I'm going to leave the string and beads the way it is. You can snip it off or even paint the beads. You can also hang this. There's a place that will hold a screw on the back, or you can hot glue some rope. But for this I'm going to have it stand upright. You can place some flowers or stems inside or use it as an organizer as well. DIY is a quick one. I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's wooden wreath beads and I got the stained one. I also got some greenery and flowers from Dollar Tree as well. I got these a while back. The colors are so pretty and you have 2 different shades of pink, which is nice. So first, I start by bending the stems of the greenery to match the round shape of the wreath. I'm gently shaping and curving them so they blend in naturally. You can also trim them down a bit if you want, but I'm keeping them intact since it makes attaching them to the wreath much easier. To attach, I cut a piece of floral wire and I wind it around the stem of the greenery to secure it in place. For added stability, you can also wrap some wire higher up on the stem. And then I place another greenery stem, securing it in place. This time going the opposite direction and also making sure I have some space in between for some flowers. Now for the flowers, I'll be gluing 3 of them in the center with a darker pink in the middle and the lighter pink ones on each side. That's all I'm doing for this one, but you can definitely add more flowers if you'd like, or even a small wooden sign across the middle. But personally, I love the simplicity of this one. I attached some ribbon to hang the wreath, and this one's done. So for this project, I'm going to be making a super cute spring wooden bead garland. I wanted to have different sizes and textures of wood to really make the garland pop. I'll be using the square bead garland from Dollar Tree along with some round beads. These are 2 different sizes and I got these on Amazon. And I will also be using these round wood slices from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to be drilling a hole right through the wood slices. Instead of holding them directly, I'm going to hold them with this clamp, and with a small drill bit, I'm using a 1/8 inch, I drill through the wood. You really don't want to go too thick with the drill bit, otherwise the wood may crack, and I'm going to drill through 5 of these. I will be using the string from the square garland, so I untie the ends and remove the beads. I'll be attaching a tassel on one end of the garland. I wrap some jute twine around my glue bottle, which is the size that I want. You can also just wrap it around your hand as well, and I wrap it about 20 times. I slide it out, and then on top I place a lace ribbon, which I'll trim down later. I cut out a piece of jute string, and I tie a couple knots on top. And then I flip the knot over so that the knot is hidden. Then I tie the end of the string from the garland around the top loop as well, leaving a couple inches of the shorter end. You can trim that out, but I'll be concealing it later. Then I cut the bottom loop like so. I take a small strip of the ribbon and I hot glue that around the top of the tassel about 1 inch from the top. And then I just trim the bottom of the tassel so that everything is even. I'm going to paint the wood slices with some green acrylic paint. This is grass green from Faux. I really don't want it to be too opaque, but more like a wash, so I dilute the paint with a little bit of water. On the other end, I'm going to be tying this wooden carrot from Dollar Tree. I'll be using this orange acrylic paint from Dollar Tree, and I mute it down with a little bit of light gray. As I'm brushing this on, I kind of didn't like how thin the wood was, so I decided to thicken it up by gluing another carrot to it. You can actually glue 3 together. I think that would have looked even better. Then I paint the top of the carrot green, a beautiful olive color. I give it a little sanding with a fine grit sanding sheet all over to dull down the paint and especially the edges. Once that is done, it's time to put everything together. I string through the beads, kind of alternating with the round and the square, and then spacing out the slices evenly. I tie the carrot on the end, concealing that extra string inside the beads, which you can also just snip off. And with that, our garland is complete. I'm really happy with how it turned out, especially with the different shapes. I love it. I'm going to be using this small wooden tray from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this blue rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree as well. And I'm going to be adhering that onto the surface of the tray. So I trim the transfer so that it will fit nicely inside the tray because it's a little bit larger. I peel off the white backing paper and I place that inside the tray, and if I measured and cut correctly, it should fit nicely inside. I use the scraper to rub and go over the transfer a couple times, and then I get my little tiny scissors with a very pointy tip to pull back a corner of the transfer. It is really snug inside the tray. To transfer, I just rub all over while gently pulling back the clear sheet. If it doesn't completely transfer, then I just lay it back down and I just rub it over it again with a popsicle stick, which actually worked better than the Dollar Tree scraper. So I just take my time with it. I don't want to rush it, and eventually I get all the transfer down in one piece. I love the blue pattern against the natural wood, which is why I decided to leave the tray as is. I'm going to need 4 tumbling tower blocks and 4 craft cubes, and I'm going to glue them together like so. I'm going to stain them with the same stain I've been using throughout this video from Bear in the shade Special Walnut. I also make sure to stain the sides of the cubes because that part can be seen a little bit, and I do wipe down the blocks to remove any stain that hasn't absorbed. Next, I get some jute cord and I just wrap that around the handles. I use a little bit of hot glue to hold it in place, and I just wind it around and then I secure the ends with hot glue. And this is going to match the stain blocks nicely. Then I hot glue the blocks underneath on each corner. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and click that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my new videos. And finally, I brush on some clear wax all over to protect the transfer as well as the raw wood, but you can also use Mod Podge or whatever sealant you prefer. And we are done. I'll be using burlap canvases from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using 4 for this project. The first step is to remove the burlap, which I'll be using later. I just want to reposition it, so I need to pull out the staples. Now, to be honest, I didn't realize there were going to be this many staples. This was definitely the longest part of this project and my least favorite. Also, there were some staples holding together the front corners, which I did remove, and I also reinforced any shaky joints with some wood glue. I'll be gluing these 4 wooden frames together to look like a window pane, just like so. This is Super Glue's wood glue, which I got at Dollar Tree. I want the front to be even and flush, so I do make sure the back is what's facing up. I clamp the frame together and I just continue applying the glue and clamping to ensure a tight bond. Once it's dried, I turn it over and I give it a light sanding. For any areas where there are visible holes or gaps, I just smooth on some spackle over that to cover and smooth it out. I let it dry a bit and then I sand those areas again just to smooth things out even more. I'm going to dry brush on some white chalk paint. This one's from Faux and I'm just using a chalk paintbrush and I lightly go over the frame. I really don't want it to go on too opaque. I do want it to look a bit distressed and weathered with some of the wood underneath peeking through. Next, I will be gluing the burlap back on, and so I trim one down to fit a frame. And then I glue it down on the back. I apply a strip of glue on one side of the frame, and then I attach the burlap to that. And as I'm gluing, I make sure that it's glued nice and tight, gently pulling the fabric, especially after I get two sides down. I did switch to a roller cutter which cuts smoothly and much more quickly. And then just continue gluing down the rest of the burlap, applying hot glue on the frame one side at a time, making sure to gently pull it back so that it goes on nice and tight. I really love how this is looking already. Now to finish it off, I place a little hook in the center. You can also use command hooks if you want to remove it later and change things up. And then just attach a little tin bucket to that. You can place some flowers or greenery inside or attach a little wreath on the hook instead. And we are done! I really love how this one turned out. For DIY, I'll be using 3 of these thick rectangular wood blocks from Dollar Tree to make an adorable little wooden book stack for spring. I really love how thick and sturdy these blocks are. I'll be stacking them on top of each other, and here I'm just making sure I have the side of the blocks that I like, and so I'm just checking out all the sides to see which one looks best. I'm going to be painting the blocks different colors, so I picked some light pastel shades that give off those spring vibes. For the first block, I'll be painting this really pretty lilac paint from Faux. This is actually a paint and sealer in one, which is perfect because this is going to be on the top of the stack and it will just give it that extra protection. I'm using a sponge brush and it just goes on so beautifully. I'm going to be painting the top surface and the sides, leaving the bottom unpainted since I'll be applying glue there. I did about 2 coats for a nice even coverage. Once that's done, I set it aside to dry because in a bit, I'll be applying a decorative stencil to give it some pretty detail. For the second block, I'll be painting it white using Waverly's white chalk paint. Since this block is going to be in the center of the stack, I'm just focusing on painting the sides, so this one was super quick to do. I'll be Mod Podging a decorative napkin over it, but before I get to that, I'm going to paint the final bottom block in moss green from Waverly. This shade is so beautiful. It's a rich, earthy, rustic green. It's so pretty. And since this is going to be the bottom block, I figured I'd go ahead and paint the bottom side too, just to finish it off nicely. I'm not planning to add any wording, so now I have the option to flip it over and make it the top. Now that the paint has completely dried, I'm ready to add some fun details to them. For the lilac block, I'll be adding an antique looking metallic sticker on the side. It has some really nice detailing and I get these at Dollar Tree. I use them often and I happen to have one that was narrow enough to fit perfectly on the side. I just stick it on, but for extra security, you can always add a little glue underneath. I'm painting right over it with the same lilac paint, but honestly, this wasn't really part of my original plan. Otherwise, I would have attached the sticker first and then painted the whole block. But you know, you can always leave it unpainted, or you could also paint it white before attaching the sticker. I think that contrast would have looked really nice too. On the top of the block, I'll be adding some stenciling. This is a 3-pack stencil set from Walmart, and I'll be using the leaf design. I'm using white chalk paint for this, and so I taped the stencil down securely. I dip my brush in the paint and remove any excess on a paper towel, and then I stipple lightly over the stencil, applying the paint in thin layers to avoid any bleeding underneath. It's important to build up the color gradually, adding just a little paint at a time. Now I'm not going for a solid heavy look with the stencil. I want the design to feel softer and more subtle, so I'm applying the paint lightly in some areas for a more delicate finish. So far I'm so happy with how this one's looking. I love all the details. For the green block, I'm using another stencil from a Walmart pack. I'm going with a white chalk paint again for this one. Walmart does have some really nice stencils at a great price, and I love how this turned out too. It has that vintage old storybook vibe. For the middle one, I'm going to Mod Podge this pretty floral napkin on it. I got it at Michael's, and I just love the soft pastel colors. I think it'll complement the other two blocks perfectly. So the first step is to carefully separate the layers of the napkin. I only need the top layer since that's where the design is. Once I have that, I'm cutting out the part of the napkin I want to use. Next, I'm applying a generous amount of Mod Podge to the narrow side of the wood where I want the napkin to go. I'm also spreading a bit onto the edge of the wider side to help the napkin tuck in smoothly and create a cleaner finish once it's applied. Now I'll be using the iron-on method to attach the napkin. So once the Mod Podge is completely dry, I place the napkin on top of the wood where I've applied the glue. To protect the napkin, I'm placing a piece of parchment paper over that. The heat reactivates the glue and that helps to bond the napkin to the wood. Then I'm just carefully running my mini heat press, you can also use an iron, over the parchment paper. And in the end, you get a really smooth, seamless finish with no wrinkles or bubbles. And after that, I just sand off the overhang. And finally, I glue everything together. I'm using wood glue for a strong, secure hold with a bit of hot glue here and there just to give it that quick grip while it sets. So I just stack the wood blocks on top of each other, making sure they're lined up just right. You can leave it as is. You can also embellish with some ribbon or jute string. I love how this turned out. Each block is so unique, and I think that's what makes it even better. I love that they all don't match perfectly, and it gives it such a charming, eclectic feel. When I was at Dollar Tree, I was looking for a metal bunny wreath frame, but my store didn't have it. So instead, I grabbed this tinsel-wrapped bunny, and I will be wrapping the bunny with this jute cord. So I'm going to remove the white tinsel. It's actually really easy to take out because it's not glued. It's just wrapped around these plastic tabs, so it does come out quite easily without any hassle. And underneath is a plastic frame of a bunny. I'm going to remove the middle portion of the frame, and I'm using these diagonal pliers to cut through the plastic. I tried with scissors, but it was just taking a little too long to cut through, so this worked pretty well. I also trimmed off those plastic tabs that were sticking out. And then I just start wrapping. I start with the ears and I add a little hot glue on the top, and then I just wrap it all the way down, adding a dab of hot glue here and there to secure it in place. Now once I get to the top of the bunny head, I wrap it and then I snip off the cord and hot glue it on the back. And then I wrap the other ear the exact same way. Of course, you can really start anywhere, but you just want to make sure to cover the plastic frame. And I'm loving how this is looking already. I'm going to embellish with the stems of mini flowers from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to hot glue them around the bottom portion or the bunny face. So I just bend the stems to match the shape, and then I place them down and secure it with a little bit of hot glue. Now I really like it just like that with these little flowers. It's very simple and beautiful, but you can definitely embellish with some more flowers and add a bow to it as well. And then I just attach a ribbon to hang. And that's it. This adorable DIY is done. Thank you so much. Making a wooden basket with a handle for this project, and I'll be using this Dollar Tree frame. I wanted to remove the whiteboard and I thought it would come right out, but it was really secured in place. Cutting out a small section will make it easier to loosen and wiggle that board free, but you will need something strong like a box cutter or a utility knife since the board is pretty sturdy. I'll be using a couple of these small wooden crates, and these are from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue them together side by side. Now I'm going to cover the shorter sides with a couple of giant craft sticks. I'll be using 2 for the front and 2 for the back. To measure, I simply hold the sticks up against the side of the box and mark the width. Then I trim the sticks down to fit. Once they're cut, I lightly sand the ends to smooth them out. For gluing, I flip the crates over so that the bottom is facing up. I want the craft sticks to be flushed with the top of the box. Then I apply glue to the sticks and press them into place. You could totally leave it like this. It looks great already, but I wanted to add a few embellishments to the wood. I'm going to use these puffy metallic stickers, which I got at Dollar Tree. I love using these for crafting. They add such a nice detail. Before I stick them onto the wood, I'm going to mix a couple of acrylic paint colors to get the shade that I want. But feel free to use any color you like. Light greens or blues or deep colors would work great too. I'm going to place the stickers on the wood because I'm going to paint over it. If you want, you can add a little glue to the back of the stickers like Titebond Quick and Thick glue, just to make sure they stay in place. Personally, I'm just going to stick them directly on, and I'm just trying to place the flower right in the center. I do also put one on the opposite side. After that, I brush over the paint, making sure to fully cover the metallic stickers. Now, in order to fully cover the flower, you'll need a couple of coats. So once I get one coat down, I just use a heat tool to speed up the drying time, and then I apply another coat. Now, another really pretty option is to paint the box first and then attach the flower on top if you want to preserve the vintage look of the stickers. So I paint all over the wooden boxes, including the inside, even though most of it will be covered later. Next, I'm just brushing some white paint all over the frame to give it a bit of a weathered look. I love that effect. And I also wanted to keep some of the frame peeking through underneath for some contrast. Once that's dry, I add some hot glue to the bottom of the frame like so. Then I place the crates on top. I just hold it in place until the glue sets. To keep it from wobbling, I'm gluing in some of these beads to the bottom. I'll be adding some flowers inside, so I grabbed a couple of Dollar Tree flower bouquets in pink and purple. I'm cutting some floral foam to fit inside the small crates. I thought I had it right, but I cut a little too short, so I had to trim a bit more to bring it closer to the height of the crates. And that will make it much easier to arrange the flowers. Okay, after that, I'm just trimming the flowers off the stems and arranging them in the basket, mixing the colors until I like the way it looks. I'm placing them all around but focusing more on one side. I'm also tucking in some greenery from Dollar Tree to fill in any empty spaces. You can just play around with the arrangement until you like the way it looks. You can keep it simple with some neutral greeneries or succulents, or even place some candles with a few flowers inside. Either way, you have a beautiful wooden basket to display it all in. For the next project, I'll be using 4 of these mini square wood pallets from Dollar Tree. I'm going to transform them into some beautiful coasters. I found these gorgeous napkins at Michael's and I thought they were just perfect for spring. The soft pastel colors are exactly what I was looking for, and I think they'll look amazing on the wood. I'm going to Mod Podge the napkins onto the pallets using the iron-on method, which makes it super easy to get a smooth finish. So for the first palette, I'm brushing Mod Podge over the entire top, and I'm making sure to apply a nice even layer so the napkin sticks well. I thought it'd be fun to mix things up and give each one a unique design. So on another, I'm just applying Mod Podge on the 3 center slats, and another on the 2 outer ones. And on the last one, I just do every other. So that way each coaster has its own look, but they still feel like a set. And then I just let that Mod Podge dry completely. Before I iron on the napkin, I make sure to separate the layers since it's double ply. You only want to use a top printed layer for this, and so I just carefully peel them apart, and then I cut the napkins to fit over the pallets. Now I'm using my mini heat press on a low setting, but you can also use a regular iron for this step too. To protect the napkin from direct heat, I place a sheet of parchment paper over it. And then I just gently press down and slowly move the heat press across the surface. The heat reactivates the dried Mod Podge underneath, causing the napkin to adhere perfectly to the wood. I love using the iron-on method because it gives such a smooth, clean, bubble-free finish without the risk of wrinkling or tearing the napkin, and it really helps the design look like it's part of the wood itself. Next, I'm sanding off the overhang to clean up the edges and make everything look nice. I'm using my mini sander for the outer edges, and for those hard to reach spots between the wood slats, I switched to a smaller sanding sheet. I carefully cut between these slats first so I can easily slide the sanding sheet right through. Wow, as I'm sanding, I'm really loving how it's turning out. I'm so glad I decided to mix things up where I place the napkins. It's actually quite satisfying seeing the different designs come together, and you know what, it's looking even better than I imagined. I wanted to have a little storage for the coasters, so I'm using this small wooden crate from Dollar Tree, and it's just the right size. I want to match it with the coasters, so I'm going to do the same thing, applying Mod Podge to the crate, and once that dries, ironing on the napkin to reactivate the Mod Podge, which will adhere the napkin in place. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so next is sanding, and I'm cutting slits between the gaps with a craft knife so I can get a sanding sheet right in between to remove the overhang. The final step is sealing the napkin in place. So I did apply a layer of Mod Podge right on top, and now that it's dry, I'm ironing over it to help flatten any bubbles that may have formed. And you really want to make sure to have a piece of parchment paper in between to protect the napkin, and you also don't want any of that glue getting on your iron. Now this part is optional, but since these are coasters and will be exposed to different temperatures, I decided to add an extra layer of protection by spraying on some spar urethane from Minwax. Especially if you're making these as gifts, that extra layer will just help protect the design and the wood from moisture and heat, so they'll stay looking nice longer. Alright, next I'm adding some cork to the bottom. I get these cork sheets at Dollar Tree, and they're super convenient because they have a sticky back, which makes the whole process so much easier. I'm cutting a few strips from each coaster using a craft knife, sticking 2 strips on the outer edges of the bottom of each coaster, and this will help protect your surfaces from scratches and make sure the coasters don't slip around. Alright, so I thought I was done, but I wanted to take it a step further and make it look even nicer. The crate is a little longer than the pallets, so I wanted to close those gaps up a bit. I decided to trim some bamboo sticks to fit and cover up the gap. I glued them in place, and I really love how it turned out. It just gave everything a more finished, polished look and made the whole thing come together even better. Okay, so out of all the new Dollar Tree peel and stick wallpaper that I got, this one is definitely my absolute favorite. It even has a beautiful metallic shimmer, and I really regret only getting one. Now, I know I wanted to use most of it, if not all of the wallpaper. It was so pretty, and I really didn't want to cut it up. So at the Dollar Tree Plus section, I picked up one of their large fall trays. I was definitely loving the size. Now, it does say it's food safe, which is nice, but the fall design really wasn't my favorite, which was fine because I was planning on covering it up with the peel and stick wallpaper. And that also gives me the option to change it up from time to time. Now the wallpaper covers the surface of the tray lengthwise, but it's about 1/4 of an inch short on the width. So I'm going to paint the surface of the tray, really focusing on the edges. The tray is a little off-white, and so I do try my best to color match. I just added a few drops of gray and beige to white, and it was actually almost a perfect match. Now, just to make sure the pattern underneath doesn't show through, I do also paint the entire surface, just a thin layer to mute it down, because I did notice that on some of the other wallpapers, especially in the areas that were white, it was a little transparent. And once it dries, I just peel back a few inches of the backing paper, and then I just line it up on one side, and then I slowly peel back the bottom paper while smoothing down the wallpaper. And then I just crease the excess on the end, and then I trim it with a craft knife. And that's pretty much it for this one. It's super quick and simple. You can definitely switch out the wallpaper if you want to switch it up. But for now, I really love the pattern on this one. Project, I'm going to be using this really cute wooden easel, which I got at Dollar Tree. I love the natural light wood finish, and I think it'll look great for what I have planned. I want to give the easel a spring update, so I'll be using this adorable rub-on transfer from the sticker and stencil section at Dollar Tree. The colors are perfect for spring, and I think they'll really make the project pop. So instead of cutting out the individual flowers, I decided to cover the entire easel with them. I simply laid the easel on top of the transfer sheet and scored the side to create an indentation where I'll need to cut. Then I trimmed out that part. After removing the white backing, I noticed that there was a bit of empty space on the bottom, so I went ahead and trimmed that out as well. Then I carefully placed the transfer on top of the easel, and I used a popsicle stick to rub the flowers onto the wood. I also held the popsicle stick on its side to cover more surface area. I carefully lift up one corner. Basically, you just want to keep rubbing over the flowers with a popsicle stick, carefully removing the plastic as you go. And if there are any areas that didn't come out completely, just go over them again until it's completely transferred. Then I take a little skewer, and with a pointy side, I slowly go over the slots to remove that extra transfer. I'm going to be using this jute string, which I think I pulled out of a Dollar Tree wood sign, and some wooden beads, as well as this mini clothespin. I string through the wooden beads, making sure there's enough space in the center for the little clothespin. I hot glue the ends on the back, and there you have it. A beautiful piece that's perfect for spring. Next decor DIY, I'm using this square piece of wood from Dollar Tree. It has a raised 3D design on the front, but I'm actually going to use the back instead. I want to add some stenciling to the wood to create a light background design. I got this stencil set on Amazon, and it came in a pack of 6. I'll be using one of them for this project. Now, it was a bit thin, and I actually thought it was going to be a little bigger, but it still worked out well. They're very pretty designs. I'll be using white chalk paint, and I decided to leave the wood as is instead of painting it. I could have added a bit more contrast by either painting the wood or using a different stencil color, but I really wanted the design to be subtle in the background. I didn't want it to stand out too much since I'm going to be placing a wreath on top. So I'm starting in the center, and I tape the stencil down to keep it from shifting while I work. I lightly load my brush with paint, making sure to dab off any excess so it doesn't bleed under the stencil. Then using a soft dabbing motion, I start applying the paint over the design, gradually building it up. Okay, once I finish the section in the middle, I shift the stencil over to the left. I line it up to connect the design, and then I just continue stenciling. And I keep going until the whole wood square is covered, and honestly, this was super easy to do. The design is super light, maybe a little hard to see with my lighting, but I'm really loving how it's coming along. On top of the wood square, I'll be placing this Dollar Tree frame, and it was just the perfect size. So I'm just turning it over and removing the backing board. And then I'm just pulling out with my pliers all the metal tabs, and those pop right out so easily. To attach to the wood, I started by applying hot glue all over the frame. I really thought that would be enough to hold it, but I was wrong. The frame isn't real wood, or maybe I was too slow and the glue dried too quickly, but either way, it popped off. So I switched to using Titebond quick and thick glue with some hot glue here and there for that instant bond. Then I clamped it all around and gave it some time to dry, and yeah, that worked much better. I'll be adding a cute little wreath on top using this gold metal hoop. I'm decorating it with some beautiful flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet, keeping it soft and simple. So I'm going to be gluing a couple of these leaves together, making sure they're going in opposite directions. I'm just adding the glue to the stems, making sure there's a little space in the center, and I'll make 2 of these. Before I start gluing the flowers onto the hoop, I noticed it was looking a little brassy and faded in some areas, so I'm just going to use some Rub and Buff wax to give it a bit of a refresh. I'm using a piece of cloth to apply that on the hoop, so now that's looking much better. I thought I'd add these little pink fuchsia colored flowers behind the leaves. They're so pretty and dainty, and I'm just going to add them to one of the glued leaves. And then I'm wrapping some jute string around the center, and this will make it easier to glue some flowers in the middle, and it also cleans it up. And from there, I'm wrapping it around the metal hoop to attach it and hold it in place. And I'm also securing it in with more hot glue. Next, I'm going to add a couple of flowers in the center. I love these flowers. They're very simple, but they really complete the look, and they just tie everything together. For the next set of glued leaves, I'm just gluing them directly onto the hoop, then wrapping some jute string around the center. This one isn't going to be as full as the one in the bottom, but it's going to complement it and help balance out the wreath. I'm just placing one flower in the center, and then I'm adding some baby's breath around the flower to add more texture and fill in the empty spaces. I'll be using some wooden letters from Michael's and Dollar Tree to spell out Hello Spring, and I'll be placing them on top of a couple giant popsicle sticks, and I just trimmed off the ends a bit so it's flat and not curved. I'll be using the word hello from this wooden word pack from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be giving the words a coat of white paint. For the craft sticks, I'm staining them with some Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm applying it with a damp cloth so that it goes on smoothly and it gives it a nice even finish. To glue together, I'm just adding some glue on the small craft stick, and I'm placing that right in the center like so. And I did also add a couple more going vertically on the ends. Next, I'm gluing the letters down using some wood glue to attach them, and I'm just spacing it out before gluing. I really like how the words have different fonts. It just makes it look even better. I decided to add some jute string on the areas of the hoop where I'm going to add glue, so I'm just wrapping about 1 inch in length on both sides. And then I apply some hot glue on top of the string, and then I placed a wooden sign right on top of that. Then I add some more glue on the back of the wrapped jute string, and then I glue that onto the wood board. I added a few more flowers in some areas. I thought it needed a few more. You can add a string hanger on the back or just lean it against the wall. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed all these quick spring DIYs. Let me know which one was your favorite and what kind of DIY project you would like to see next.